Hello everyone, welcome to this lesson, understanding the logical not unary operator. So let's dive deep. The logical not unary operator is an operator in JavaScript used to convert truthy values in JavaScript to falsy values and falsy values to truthy values. A special example of truthy value is the true boolean number. An example of a falsy value in JavaScript is the false boolean value. So let's see how the logical not works. Let's push this up our terminal. Then let's say we have a value here is done. So it's a truthy value true. Now to use the logical not on this variable, we will do this. We'll first use write the logical not operator is an exclamation mark. So this is a logical not operator. Then we will now apply the value that we want to convert. And in this case is done. Applied there. Now we see that here is done is true. But after this line, what this does is that this logical not operator converts this to false and returns it. Mind you, it does not change the value here. This evaluates to the vice versa of the truthy or the falsy value we have here. Here is true, so it converts it to false. If is done here is false like this, then this will be true. If we write it to true, then this will be false. Let's confirm it. So let's log it, then we'll now run it. You see it returned false. So you apply the logical not at the left hand side of the value or the variable we want to check or we want to convert. Then the logical not converts that operand or variable to the vice or the reverse of the boolean value there. So in this case, it converted is done to false and then returned it. So mind you, it does not change that operand. Let's verify that it doesn't change it. Now after the conversion, let's log it here. So here this line 5 should return true. So you see it returned true, it didn't change it. Now this logical not operator does not only work on boolean values, it works on other values we have in JavaScript, both primitive values and object values. Now in JavaScript, we have truthy values and we have falsy values. Now let's look at this article. Now it says in JavaScript, values that are considered truthy in conditional statements are those that are treated as true. Now let's see the list of truthy values in JavaScript. Non-falsy primitives. For example, the true boolean value is a primitive. So it's a truthy value. It evaluates to true. Non-zero numbers are truthy values. Now let's confirm it, because looking at here it says they are considered true in conditional statements. Now, using a conditional statement like this, what this does is this is the if condition. What it does is to evaluate whatever that is in between these braces. Then if this evaluates to true, it runs whatever that is inside the block. Now this is done is true. It's a true value. So it will evaluate to true. So therefore the block will run. Now what if we put in a value that is not a boolean primitive? Like for example, we put a number. Now this evaluates to true because it is a number. It is a non-zero number. So let's be looking at our list. It's a non-zero number, so it evaluates as true. So you see it runs. So this is how we know truthy and falsy values. 0 is a falsy value. So the block this is true will not run at all. But now using the logical not is when we can now convert a boolean value to its opposite. Now let's look at our article on it. So we'll look at into more examples. Let's open this side by side and look at more examples. Now, a string like this is a truthy value. Whatever that is inside is a truthy value. Now, if you write this here, it will log false because string already is a truthy value. It evaluates to true. So attaching this logical not here converts that true to false. So this line 1 will log false. So you see it. Now let's look at more examples on the logical not. Let's pick the empty string. An empty string in JavaScript is a falsy value. So if we do something like this will return false. So the body of this if condition will not be run, will not be executed. If we add else here, it will be this else body condition that will be run because an empty string in JavaScript evaluates to false. So in that same way, since it evaluates to false and we add a logical not here, then this will now be true. Because since this gives false, appending logical not at its left will now convert the false to true. So if we log it, we'll see true. Very good. Let's look at an array. An array is a truthy value. Whether it is empty or not, it is a truthy value. It evaluates to true. So doing something like this will work. It will work. Let's try it. So you see an empty array is a truthy value in JavaScript. So appending logical not to it will make it convert it now to be false. Let's see it. See it false. So remember, an empty array is a truthy value. So using it against logical not will convert it to a falsy value. Now we have seen this true using the true primitive. So basically this will be converted to false. Then if we use false here instead, this will be converted to true. So therefore this will be run in this case because this will be converted to true. So, but if we put true here, this will not be run. Instead, the else block will be run in this case. Let's see it. You see it now. I am inside else block is run because this evaluates to false and this will evaluate to true. Let's run it. You see, I'm inside if block. Now let's look at an empty object. An empty object literal. An empty object literal is a truthy value. In fact, all objects in JavaScript is a truthy value. Even objects gotten from custom classes are truthy values. So look at it here. Objects are truthy values. Any object, including user-defined object, arrays, even if empty, functions, even if empty, instances of custom classes are all truthy values. Are all truthy values. So this is true. So do something like this. Do something like this. Will return true. You see it true. So it's true. Now, if we convert it, if we append the logical node to it, it will convert it to false. So the if block will not run. Nothing. So let's add the else block and you'll see what happens. See it. The else block runs because this object literal is a truthy value. Then using logical node to it makes it a falsy value. Even from custom classes, let's look at custom classes. So let's create a custom class in JavaScript like this. Now let's create an object of it. Now A is a truthy value. So this works. True will be logged. But now appending logical not makes it to be a falsy value. So the if block will be skipped and the else block will be run instead like this. Very good. Then functions. For example, a function like this x, a function is a truthy value. So if we use this condition, if condition here, if the x is a function, it's a truthy value. So this else if block will be run. Let's check it to see it's true. Now append, if you append this, the logical not to x, it will convert its truthy value to a falsy value. So the else block will be run instead. So this is very important in our day-to-day applications in the code we write to make sure what we are doing in the if condition. Because remember, the if condition only evaluates whatever that it's in these brackets to a boolean condition. Then from there, it now runs here if the boolean value is true or if the boolean value is false, this block. Now let's look at none. None is a number. This is a number. It comes from this, not a number. So they picked n, the first word letter n, this a, and the first letter in number. Now this being a number, but it's not a truthy value, it's a falsy value. You can verify it like this: none since none is a falsy value. So if we append this, it will convert it to a truthy value, and we'll do something and we run it now. None is truthy will be logged. So none is a truthy value, is a falsy value, sorry. Then appending the logical not to it makes it convert it to a falsy value. Now let's look at logical not operation on the null value. Now the null value in JavaScript is a falsy value. So if we put it here, null, and then we'll log it, see, this else block will be run because null is a false value. Now if we put logical not to it, to convert it to a truthy value, so the if block will be run. You see it, the if block runs in this case. Now let's look at undefined. Undefined also is a falsy value in JavaScript. In this case, the else block will be run. See it, this is false, the else block is run in this case because undefined is a falsy value. Now if you append the logical not to it, it will convert it to a truthy value. So the if block is run in this case. This is truthy, is logged. So undefined, null are all falsy value. But the not logical not operator converts their truthy values into falsy values. 0 is a falsy value because 0 is just like false in Boolean primitive. So if we log it, you see that this is falsy is logged. But if we append the logical not to it, this expression here becomes a truthy value. So the if block is run in this case. You see it, this is truthy run. So the if else block runs in this case. Now a function, we have already said a function is a truthy value. A function like this is a truthy value. So in this case x here. So x here, the if block will run in this case. Now doing it like this, adding the logical not like that will turn it to a falsy value. So in this case, well, all we are trying to tell JavaScript is if this x being a function exists, then convert it to a falsy value. That's now the work of this logical not. Like if the x function exists is true, then that true value convert it to a falsy value. Then evaluate the expression, it becomes a falsy value. Then therefore this block is run. Now we learned that 0 is a falsy value. Now what if we encase the 0 inside a string? This is no longer a number, this becomes a string. Now you might think that this string is a falsy value because it's 0. No, JavaScript sees it as a string, and it's a non-empty string. no matter whatever that is inside. It's a non-empty. So a non-empty string in JavaScript is a truthy value. So this will evaluate as true, and the if block will be run. So if we put the logical not here, it converts it to false. So therefore, the else block is run in this case. So this is falsy runs. Now also, we saw earlier that the false primitive is a falsy value. But if we encase it in a string, as a human nature, you are seeing might be thinking that this is the same thing as a false primitive. No, this is no longer a false primitive. This is a string, and it's a non-empty string. And a non-empty string is a truthy value. So this if block will be run. Now appending the logical not there, the logical not converts it to false. So that's the work of the logical not. The logical not converts a boolean value to its opposite boolean value. With logical not, true becomes false, then while false becomes true. So that's the main work, and that's how the logical not works. Now let's look at the ECMA specification for the unary logical not operator. Here, let's make it larger. Let me close this. Let me open the preview, then make it larger. So see the ECMA spec for the logical not here. Not here, logical not operator with exclamation mark. Now look at how it runs the semantics evaluation. The left hand side see it here, the exclamation mark like we already learned. Then the right hand side is the unary expression. Now look at how it runs. Let be the result of evaluating the unary expression at its right hand side is evaluated. This is it here, like for example 90. This is the unary expression. It can also be an expression maybe like this. First, the logical not to evaluate this. The answer it gets or the result of it will now convert it to boolean. And then apply the logical not itself on the result. So now number 2, it said let old value be to boolean. Now see the expression here, it calls get value. What get value does is to get the value of the right hand side of this expression. Remember, this is an expression. Also, this also is an expression. So it gets the value of them, of the expression. The value means the result of it. Then passes it to boolean. Boolean is an internal function in the JavaScript engine. Let's see how the boolean works. The boolean converts that value to a boolean primitive. Let's look at the table. See the table here. See here, boolean. The abstract operation boolean converts arguments to a value of type boolean according to table 9. Look at the table of its conversion here. So you can see what we have learned so far. If the value passed here, it's undefined, it returns false. So this tells us that undefined is a falsy value. If the argument is null, it returns false. So null is a falsy value. If it is a boolean, yeah, either true or false. There is no, just return the argument because already it's a boolean primitive. If it is a number, look at what happens. If the argument is 0 or -0 or none, return false. So number, a number is a falsy value if it is 0, -0 or none. Otherwise return true. All other numbers have truthy value except 0, -0 or none. String. See now, if the value is an empty string, that means the length is 0, return false. So all string are otherwise return true. So all string are truthy value in JavaScript except when it's an empty string. Then if symbol return true, if it's an object return true. So an object returns true whether from an empty object literal, or from custom classes, it returns true. So we see how this thing works. So when it returns all this, now here the logical node checks the result from the two value, assigns it to old value, then it makes the conversion on line 3. If whatever is returned in this old value, the old value is a boolean primitive, whatever it returns is true, it returns false instead and exits. Then else it returns true. So this is how the logical node works deep down using the ECMA specifications. So whenever you want to learn something very deep in JavaScript, also always refer to the ECMA specifications because there is a book written out on how every operators works in JavaScript. Now let's look at double negation. We have seen the logical node, like we are placing only one exclamation mark, but we can actually add double exclamation mark here. So this is what we call double negation or double not. So what this actually does is to apply the logical not twice on the operand. Now, what happens here is that first this runs logical not on the true value there, it returns false. Then whatever it returns, which is false in this case, it applies the second double not against that result, then returns the final result of the expression or the evaluation. So this is a simple expression of the double negation. It is also equals to this. Doing that double negation is same as doing this. Yes, or for clarity's sake, then so this is just what happens above. So we just apply the logical not against the value true. Then the result is here, which is in this case is false. Then we apply the logical not against the result in this is status again. It now returns us true. So with this now, this returns converts convert the operand or the unary expression to a false value and then reconverts it into the initial Boolean expression of this. So that is just what happens here in the logical not. So it first applies the logical not on the expression. It returns the opposite of the boolean value of that expression. Then it applies the logical not again on the result, then gives us the final value. So the final value is what happens here. That is what double negation does. So it gives us so we can see that double logical not is very useful in finding out whether a value is truthy or falsy. So we use the double not to find out whether a value is a truthy value or a falsy value. So it's a shortcut of using the boolean function. So instead of we doing like this, like we want to know, we are doing this so as to know whether uh this string is a truthy or a falsy value. Let's run it. Let me console log it. It's truthy. Then we'll console log it. You see, it is true. So instead of using this, we can actually use the double logical not like this. You see, so that's a very good and very simple way to convert or to check for truthiness or falsiness in a value in JavaScript. That's what the double logical not does for us. So we have come to the end of this our lesson, understanding logical not operator. We have learned a lot in this lesson. We have learned how to use the logical not, and also we have learned both falsy and truthy values in JavaScript, what they are. So to recap, truthy values are non-empty strings, numbers except none and zero. All array objects are truthy values. And also the boolean true primitive value is a truthy value. Then apart from this list, all other values are falsy values like null, undefined, zero, false, empty string, none, and then zero are all falsy values.